Hello, WhoDey Nation en español. As you know, my name is Orson G, and I am here with a very special guest, as you can see, because you know him from, his podcast. I'm sure you've seen it a lot of times. I'm here with Jake Liscow from Lockdown Bengals, and I really appreciate your time, Jake. Welcome to WhoDey Nation en español.
Glad to be here. Glad to spend some time on the other side of the United States, where I'm in Canada and you're down on the other end of that country.
Absolutely, and well, as we chatted before, it makes clear that you don't have to be in Cincinnati to cover the Bengals. Something that you've done pretty well for more than a couple of years. And I would like to know, how is it that from IT management and business analysis, you end up being one of the most credited sources covering the Cincinnati Bengals? How was that transition?
Yeah, so it probably goes back to high school for me. I grew up in Cincinnati, so I was around the Bengals until I was, 18 years old, and then I moved away for college and never really ended up going back to Cincinnati to live as an adult. But in high school, I got into journalism a little bit. I was part of my high school newspaper for a couple of years, and then just kind of kept tabs. I was just a sports fan for a long time. I was just into football for my college years, for my first couple of years as a professional. But then 2012, I think 2012, 2013, um, Pro Football Focus was coming into the world of social media and the football media sphere in a more significant way. And so I had an opportunity to try to work for Pro Football Focus, and I really liked football. And I was like, hey, if I could go work in football, that would be a lot of fun. And so I left my first job to go work for Pro Football Focus for a year. And in that work, I learned a whole lot about the sport on a much more detailed level. Was you know charting games, was doing my own research, got into film analysis and all that stuff. And I thought I knew more than I did at the time. There's that really fun graph that shows your experience level and expertise charted against your confidence, and you get to the peak of Mount Stupid at the beginning is what it's called. And that's where you think you know everything, but you don't know anything yet, and you're really confident in it. And then you start to realize, as you start going down in confidence but up in expertise, that you don't actually know everything about the sport. And so then I spent a few years, learning more about the sport while I returned to a normal paying job. So I did the PFF thing for a year and just continued to read and learn and watch film and expose myself wherever I could. And as time has gone on, more and more resources have become available for people who want to learn about the game, whether it's guys like JT O'Sullivan and Kurt Warner, former quarterbacks that do great quarterback analysis on YouTube, or, coaches where, they're running clinics, and those clinic videos get published onto YouTube, and you can really start to hear the nitty gritty about how a certain offensive line coach coaches hand technique, hand placement, and footwork, or where they want guys, what landmarks are in certain plays. So it can really get really detailed. And I've been privileged enough to have opportunities to sit in on some video meetings with some NFL coaches as well, where they've walked me through bits of install that they've put in. And so I've had a lot of opportunities like that to really expand my understanding of the game. And a lot of it is just time. I spend not a ton of time anymore, but certainly there was a period of time where I was watching these games 2, 3, 4 times once the coach's film comes out, and looking for certain things. And the more you do that and you expose yourself to other people doing the same things, and you pay attention to the observations they have, you go back and you watch, and you see what you can see. You learn more about the game. And I've had opportunities to do that with some really smart people like Joe Goodberry, like Mike Santagata, where we've gone through the film together on live streams and stuff like that. And, Mike obviously has a very keen technical eye for the game. Joe has a great scouting eye for the game. And so just going through tape with both of them and bouncing ideas off of each other has really helped me to build my expertise as well. So that's a really long-winded answer for how I got to kind of where I'm at today. And as far as the notoriety of being a podcaster on Locked On Bengals, that goes back to me just having worked with Joe for a long time. And when they approached Joe first, Joe brought me along for the ride, and that's where I've been since, as I've slowly been building my credibility, hopefully, over the last few years.
Oh, of course it has. And well, apparently, fans and also public in general are growing more interested in having specialists running these shows. I mean, they're eager to find not only general NFL information that was maybe the general product when we were growing up, when we were starting watching football, maybe back in the 80s. Now the audiences are willing to take only what they're interested and products like Locked On Bengals and well, many products that some producers are releasing out there make it, I don't know if it makes it a little bit harder or easier on your kind of journalism to really go around.
Yeah, I think that there's just more information available. Obviously, information age, right? The internet existing, so many videos existing on YouTube, like I said, of all these resources. People just know more than they used to, and we have a better idea of the things that matter from a statistics perspective, from a what matters on the football field, from a film perspective, from an athleticism profile perspective. All this work has really bloomed and boomed in the last 10 to 12 to 15 years. And the proliferation of available information, people are eating that up. And it's not just football. I think it's all sorts of things where people can really cater the media that they intake to the things that they're interested in. And there are problems with this. Obviously, if we want to get philosophical, there are problems with the echo chambers that get generated out of you limiting your information and your discourse to only a certain circle, and you start to amplify certain beliefs. And this is a problem I've seen in NFL media as well. Like after week 1, week 2 of the season, every single major outlet wants to talk about what's going wrong with the Bengals offense. And there are some good points in there, but there's also some very surface level analysis that ends up getting amplified because, when more people start repeating the same thing, it gains credibility, even though at its foundation, it might only be partially true. And so one of the things that I really strive for on the platform I have is to always focus on objectivity and getting to the truth. And so that's always been my biggest focus, where a lot of media, we're paid by clicks, right? The
Yep.
more people that listen to my content, the more people that watch my YouTube videos, the more I get paid. And that's certainly an incentive for me. But for me, the way that I've felt is most genuine for myself to drive that growth and build a product that is authentically what I want to create is this always focusing on truth and focusing on what the reality is. And sometimes that doesn't look really raw. And sometimes I get swept up in
Yep.
biases as well. But my goal has always been to fight those biases whenever I can.
Yeah, and I guess that's what Locked On has been doing so far. You with James watching you almost every day on our screens, and sometimes building a little bit of critique, and sometimes also finding the key points that no one has ever seen. I guess that's why audiences are looking for specific products, and especially very hard to find to a small market such as the Bengals market, not only in America or maybe Canada, but also in Latin America. It's very hard finding products related, Bengals related, even looking in maybe NFL Network, products that might be obliged to have content about every of or any of the 32 teams, and I guess that's what makes it work. That you're running a transparent and a very sincere product, and I guess the audiences are really thinking it.
Yeah, and I think that, not just that, we also have a passion for the team. And the team's really exciting right now. That
Yep.
obviously helps a lot. A Super Bowl run will really help build a community and build an audience, obviously, and generate a lot of interest around a topic. And we just so happen to be covering that topic when the Super Bowl run occurred. And the Super Bowl run is one of the most visible things you can do in sports, period. I do want to say that there is also a lot of really good general NFL analysis out there that isn't focused on a specific team, but sometimes will cover things that are relevant to the Bengals. And so I just want to shout out people like Nate Tyson, Robert Mays, and Deontay Lee from The Athletic. And I talked about Kurt Warner and JT O'Sullivan, former quarterbacks who have great YouTube channels. A couple former linemen, Jeff Schwartz, Mitchell Schwartz, both doing really nice work on Twitter and writing in some cases about offensive line stuff, in addition to Brandon Thorne, who isn't a former player, but just generally does great work on the offensive line. He works with Duke Manyweather in their offensive line mastermind summits, where they'll bring together the top of the profession for, workshops and to talk shop in the offseason. Matt Boeing, Greg Cassell, or some others. And there's more. There's a lot of people that are doing really good work and covering the entire league, which, I've done as well. I was doing Locked On NFL for a while. I didn't make it very long. It's hard. It's really hard. And it gave me a real appreciation for those analysts, like the Peter, the Good Morning Football people, like the Peter Schrager's of the world and the Mina Kimes of the world, and even, the Nate Tice's of the world, to watch and keep up on what's happening with all 32 NFL teams at a level at which you can provide really good, detailed content about each of them. It's impossible. You cannot do it. There's not enough time to cover every NFL team as one person the way those teams deserve to be covered and at the level of detail that fans are looking for. And that's part of why these team specific content streams like Locked On Bengals, like your podcast, that's why these exist. And that's why we have an audience.
Exactly, and it takes a lot to build that. And well, but you can say it is also fun. It is always about the fun. What would you say is the most fun part of what you're doing right now with the Bengals?
The most fun thing for me has been just the connections that I've been able to build. As I grew up a Bengals fan. So for me, I'm not the Jay Morrison who I know you had on your show, or the Paul Dehner Jr. or the Ben Baby. I'm not an objective journalist like those are, at least on paper. And some of them, their objectivity, I think, is a little bit easier to accept than others who I think are doing a great job. I think that the Bengals generally have really good beat writers and really good local coverage. But while I do try to stay objective, I am still a fan. And so for me, the relationships that I've been able to build with the organization, with not a ton of the current players, but some current players, certainly some former players, Andrew Whitworth and Willie Anderson in the spotlight right now. Andrew Whitworth calling the Thursday night game against Miami in week 4. Willie Anderson going into the Ring of Honor that day. They appeared on Hear That Podcast Growling with Jay Morrison and Paul Dehner Jr. And, my position has afforded me the opportunity to have some kind of relationship with those guys, to have discourse with Andrew Whitworth about what's going on with the Bengals, on Twitter, to see Andrew Whitworth every now showing up when I'm looking at what's happened in my tweets and I see, oh, Andrew Whitworth liked my tweet. And that, still gives me butterflies, right? Like that's still really fun. And so stuff like that has been a lot of fun for me. Willie Anderson going into the Ring of Honor this week is a lot of fun. I just noticed this as we're recording. I just went and looked because I was looking to see when's the last time Whit liked one of my tweets, and I was just scrolling through it, and apparently Ted Karras followed me recently. So stuff like that. I got to be a little careful now about, you have to keep those things in mind, but for the most part, that's a lot of fun, right? Is building those relationships. And, on top of that, just, I get paid to spend a little bit of my time every day to talk about a team that I really care about, that I am passionate about. Right. And I'm rewarded for the time that I put into studying the game, to, building nuanced and detailed opinions and fashioning that around my understanding of the sport and my affinity for this, one of the smallest markets in the NFL. So all of that stuff is a lot of fun.
What's not to like? And I know, and we all know that the Bengals are a small market, but I'm guessing it's a market that is rapidly growing, especially with the Burrow effect, isn't it?
Absolutely, and it'll be interesting to see how that develops, I guess, over the next few years. Can they build on the success, right? It's been a choppy start to the season, and if you're on Twitter and you're on Bengals Twitter, right? And you probably are, the meltdown after the 0-2 start. And people are like, yeah, man, Zach Taylor taking this team to the Super Bowl, probably worse for this team in the long run.
The fluke narrative.
Yeah, but like, listen to yourself when you say that. Like, yeah, we made a Super Bowl appearance. That's probably bad for the Bengals.
Yeah,
I mean,
you
maybe
cannot
like
go on.
I can see what you're saying. Like, yeah, maybe Zach Taylor isn't the guy that can get them back. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe he is. We'll see. They were in a very similar position to this last year at this point, and Witt talked about that as well. And when I was going back to my tweets from this time last year, it's the same stuff. I was saying the same things, and there's ups and downs to that, right? I don't want to be saying the same things a year later. I want them to be better a year later. I want them to have not repeated those mistakes, but at the same time, it shows you how things can change. You go back to the Locked On Bengals episode after they lost to the Bears, and James and I were saying this team didn't do anything this year. They're
Yeah.
going to lose to the Bears. What the Super Bowl playoffs? What are we talking about here? And then they go on the run they do, right? So it's difficult to maintain that objectivity in the moment. Those recency biases are incredibly strong, but at the same time, you gotta keep that open mind, I guess, and try to give them a chance. At the same time, there are objective, we've talked about some of the play calling tendencies that this offense is dealing with and some of their issues against too high coverage shells. And it's just, some of the stuff we're going to talk about anyway, even if it is critical, but I'm not going to say, you know, that Super Bowl appearance that really set the Bengals back. Like, it's a Super Bowl appearance, guys. That's what they play for. You play to have a chance to win it all. And, look at what happened with the Eagles and Doug Peterson. He gets run out of town. Then he goes down to Jacksonville. Suddenly things are going well again down in Jacksonville. And maybe Doug Peterson's a better coach than Zach Taylor. Maybe not. I don't know. But, let's see how the season goes. Let's see what adjustments come in there, because we do still have a small sample size we're operating from.
And one thing about this Zach Taylor's Bengals is that you never know how it is going to turn out, right? I mean, they lose some of the games that maybe in paper looked like a W guarantee. And then they come out of these really hard games with really spectacular wins. I mean, one thing's for sure, you never know what these Bengals are going to do. And that's because time's running up, and I know you're busy. I wouldn't like to pass on the opportunity of ask you a few Bengals 2022 questions,
Sure.
and I would like for the audience on WhoDey Nation in Español to know from you, what did it take from your point of view for these Bengals to earn their first win in this season?
This season, what did they do? Well, they got to play a team that wasn't very good. That's part of it. I don't think the Jets are a good football team. And Joe Flacco, I think I said this on Lockdown Bengals when I did our all 22 takeaways on Monday with Joe. I don't know if I've seen I'm sure I have, one of the worst quarterback games that I've ever seen. The Bengals they end up with what, 4 turnovers, 4 takeaways, and 5?
5. It was 5. 2
5?
interceptions and 3 forced fumbles. Yeah.
Oh, but they only recovered 2 of the fumbles. So there were 4
That's
takeaways.
right.
And so they could have had 7. I mean, Joe Flacco was bad. The Bengals had a couple opportunities for interceptions that they didn't come down with. So that's part of it. Part of it is Trey Hendrickson going off against some bad tackles for the Jets at left tackle, showing us that Trey Hendrickson is still Trey Hendrickson. I
Yep.
mean, fantastic game. Anytime you get 3 sacks and 3 forced fumbles, he was the defensive player of the week in the AFC, and you're going to earn that most of the time when you have 3 sacks and 3 forced fumbles. I mean, it's hard to argue with. But at the same time, I think the Bengals, Joe Burrow played much better, even when he was pressured. I do think the offensive line was a little bit better, but Joe Burrow was the difference in those situations when he was pressured. I thought Burrow played better reacting to pressure. I thought he showed a little bit more poise in the pocket than we had seen from him in the first 2 weeks of the season, which now makes us 2 straight years where it's taken a little bit of time for Joe Burrow, coming off of some surgery, to look like he was feeling really comfortable. So I think that was a big factor as well. And they also took advantage of the Jets not going too high on them the entire game. The Jets and the Dolphins coming up in week 4 are not teams that are going to play a lot of too high. They're not going to sit in too high for an entire game like the Vikings are this year, for example. And so um, it gives you opportunities down the field, and the Bengals hit on a couple of those. They should have hit on more. Jamar Chase probably catches that toss throwback down the left sideline 9 times out of 10. That's a good throw. Jamar just, lost it in the air a little bit. He probably catches that most of the time. And, they hit T down on the right sideline for another one that also debated touchdown. That's 25 yards downfield where T's coming down with that ball. They're throwing it from roughly the 15-yard line. He's catching it in the back corner of the end zone. So there was some downfield stuff that was working well. Burrow was playing more decisively. And, you can't forget Samaje Perine's contributions in this game. They got a guy that you don't really count on for a whole lot. He stepped up in a big way, scoring that receiving touchdown. Nice scramble drill awareness from him and running the ball well to finish the game. 8 minutes.
He killed
an
it.
8-minute drive to really end the game is, I think, been a little bit underappreciated, but Samaje Perine finishing the game really well as well.
Absolutely. And last but not least, I would like for you to tell us what you expect from this Thursday game. What is your prediction? And of course, if we're going to see the Bengals win.
Yeah, if you've listened to me for a long time, and I know you have, that I'm not very into giving predictions. I can talk about some things that I'm expecting to see, and I think it'll be interesting to see how healthy these teams are in the short week. Thursday Night Football is always a wild card in that regard, and I think I talked about this recently on one of our episodes as well. Thursday Night Football, you'll expect a shootout sometimes, and then you'll get a defensive struggle, and then you'll expect a blowout, and you'll get a close game. You'll expect a defensive struggle, and you'll get a shootout. So often what you expect is not what plays out, and I think it's especially true on Thursday Night Football because of the short week. But the Dolphins just dealing with a lot of bumps and bruises. We'll see what's going on with some of those guys. Terron Armstead not practicing this week, and I think he's going to play, but I think that's one of the biggest matchups of the game. Terron Armstead at left tackle for the Dolphins against Trey Hendrickson. And can the Bengals generate a whole lot else without DJ Reader? Can guys like Cam Sample and Joseph Osai and Sam Hubbard step up and play well and disrupt Tua Tagovailoa in the pocket again? I think that's important. On paper, this has the makings to me of a game that could be a shootout. The Dolphins are a team that like to blitz a lot. They like to play single high on defense a lot. That should mean that the Bengals can punish it, assuming that Joe Burrow is seeing the field well and that they're protecting at an adequate level, right? If they're doing those things okay, then the opportunity should be there to punish Miami when the Bengals are on offense. And the Bills couldn't quite do it last week, but they blitzed a lot, did the Dolphins. On the other side, I think it's Tyreek and it's Jalen Waddle. Those guys have world-class track speed, and it translates to the football field. It's going to be a challenge, I think, for the secondary. Last week, though, I would say that there are chinks in the armor. It's not like a well-oiled machine, despite the results they've had so far. They've taken advantage of a depleted secondary from the Bills and some teams that I think are flawed in the Patriots earlier this year, and the comeback they had against the Ravens. That secondary doesn't deal well with speed in Baltimore. And so a real challenge for the team speed of this secondary. And, you can talk about doing things from a scheme perspective and having, your players in the right position. But at some point, the speed will be a test. The Bengals dealt with Tyreek Hill well last year. Last year when they faced Tyreek Hill, they didn't have a player like Jalen Waddle on the other side. And so dealing with it on both sides of the ball or both sides of the line of scrimmage, I think will be challenging for this defense. I think it'll be exciting to see them go against a more efficient offense for the first time this year. And it'll be a big challenge without DJ Reader. I don't think that loss can be overstated how important he is to that defense. I would argue the most important player for the Bengals defense. So, those will be challenges, but I can see where a very high scoring affair is a result of this matchup and could come down to the last possession, could come down to weird stuff happening on Thursday Night Football, much like week 1, where I said the only way the Bengals are going to lose to the Steelers is if the game gets really weird. It got really weird. The Bengals turned the ball over 5 times, and Joe Burrow did things that we haven't seen from Joe Burrow. So, barring those weird things, which do tend to happen in football games and turnovers and things like that, those can certainly be important plays. You could see this come down to who has the ball last.
Yeah, I would only add the Lyle Collins issue. That is still an issue. I see him spending more time on the floor than we would have hoped for.
Yeah.
Once we found out about his signing with the Bengals. But let's see how that works. And we really appreciate you coming to the show. I hope this is not the last time. We really enjoyed talking with you, and of course the audience will surely give us a lot of thumbs up because of you showing here. Jake Liscow from Locked On Bengals, thank you for coming into the show. See you around, and as we always say here, also like in your show, WhoDey.